we just finished 3.0. We just finished Pythagorean theorem. Pythagorean theorem rarely works. It only works when you have a right triangle, and it only works when you have two sides given to you. So that's a rare combination of things. So they had to develop a new way to find side lengths when they got different types of problems. So now we're going to start finding side lengths when we don't have two sides given to us. When we have one side given to us and an angle given to us. The very first thing you have to be able to do is label your triangles. So this is going to be a whole new method of labeling triangles. It's going to be the main method we use to label triangles, and it's going to be extremely important. So the first thing that you do is you identify the angle that you're working with. So in this case, if I'm looking at this question right here, the angle that they give you, or the angle that they label, is the one that I quote, say you're working with. So we're going to say that's our angle that we're working with. You label your triangle completely based on that. So if you can't figure out what angle you need to be working with, you can't label your triangles properly. So that's why it's very important to be like, okay, that's the angle I'm working with. They labeled it X, that's the one. There's three sides: hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. I always label my opposite first. The opposite is always what's directly across. So if you drew a line coming out of that, whatever side length you hit, that's called your opposite. So I take the angle I'm working with, I draw a line as if it's shooting out of that angle, and whatever side I run into, that's my opposite. The second one I always label is my hypotenuse, because we're pretty good at figuring out where the hypotenuse is. The hypotenuse is always the one that's directly across from the 90. It's also always the longest one, so sometimes it really sticks out. Hypotenuse, HYP. The third side is adjacent, because that's the only side left. Right? So if I can label opposite and hypotenuse, adjacent labels itself. If you're wondering how you could find adjacent first, it's always the one that will be touching the angle you're working with. See how it's actually touching that angle? But I just always deal with opposite and hypotenuse. To me, those are the two easiest ones to find. Down here, they've done the same thing. They've labeled their triangle for you, and it's based on this angle X. So opposite was directly across from it. Hypotenuse was the longest side, directly across from the 90, and adjacent was your one left over. On this beautiful page here, I want you to label all your triangles. Hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. You can do it with just 3 letters. You don't actually have to write it all out. So I did the first one up here. I took my value that I knew I was working with, the angle that they labeled for me. I drew a line shooting out of that angle. Whatever I hit, that's my opposite side. My hypotenuse usually sticks out, but it's the one directly across from the 90 degree. And my adjacent is just the third one by default. So hopefully you've labeled your triangles. I get lazy, right? So I can't even write out 3 letters like HYP. I just change it to H. So if you're just going HOA, just to make sure you know what you're doing, that's fine. Lazy people, yeah. It only gets worse as you get in higher math too. Lazy people. So, it's good, that's why I like them. I connect. This will always be your first step. Once you have a triangle built and you need to start working with it, I guarantee you the first step will be to label your triangle. So if you can't do that, you're in big trouble. Now, the reason we label that is because we have some things called trigonomic ratios. These trigonomic ratios you might have heard before, they're called sine, cosine, and tangent. Now, someone a long time ago figured out that when you build triangles, angles connect to side lengths, like we talked about earlier today. And they figured out that if you take an angle, you can figure out the ratio that those side lengths should be based on that angle, which is kind of cool. And then they did a whole bunch of calculations, and it took a whole lot of work, and then they shorthand formed it for us, and they called it sine, cosine, and tangent. In your calculator, those buttons exist. So if you're looking at this beautiful calculator, sine is SIN, cosine is COS, and tangent is TAN. We need to learn what these ratios are. These ratios are written down the side, right here. And they are basically going to be what you live by in this class. So sine is equal to the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse side. Cosine is equal to the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse side. And tangent is equal to the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. So down here, in example 1, they want you to label your triangle. So go ahead, label it based on adjacent, opposite, hypotenuse. Label that triangle. You've got to be able to do that properly. So I label it opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Now what they want you to do is they want you to write out your trigonomic ratios, but they don't want you to write sine is equal to opposite divided by hypotenuse. They want you to put what those side lengths actually are. So if we look up here, we see sine is equal to opposite divided by hypotenuse. Which sides are opposite sides? BC. So sine is equal to BC divided by your hypotenuse. So what's your hypotenuse side? BD. That's your marks. So if cosine, if we look up here in our formula, cosine is equal to adjacent divided by hypotenuse. Which sides are adjacent side? CA divided by our hypotenuse, which is Bachelor of Arts. CA stands for Certified Accountant. Tangent. Tangent is equal to opposite divided by adjacent. We know that by looking at our formula. The opposite side is BC. Our adjacent side is CA. Easy peasy, right? Good. Now we're going to do some numbers. So, before we get into this, we're going to talk about a fancy way to remember your formulas. Because this is kind of a lot, isn't it? So they came up with a little acronym. It's called SOH CAH TOA. Right here. It's highlighted, it's underlined. SOH CAH TOA. Each one of these little 3-letter segments is one of your formulas. So means sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. Yeah, we write it shorthand SIN. Remember, lazy. It's not sin, it's sine. CA stands for cosine, which is COS, equals adjacent divided by hypotenuse. So this is just a quick hand way for us to remember our formulas without actually having to memorize all those formulas. And tangent TAN is equal to opposite over adjacent. That's what SOH CAH TOA stands for. Alright. Example 2. Determine the trigonomic ratios for angle A. These are your trigonomic ratios. But there's actually numbers now. Your first step to being able to fill out your trigonomic ratios is label your triangle. You have to. So go ahead and label your triangle. Make sure you're labeling it correctly. Once you've labeled it correctly, see if you can fill out what your 3 trigonomic ratios would be equal to. So sine, remember if we're doing SOH CAH TOA, sine is equal to opposite divided by hypotenuse. Your opposite side is 3. Your hypotenuse side is 5. So I'll do the first one for you. Do the next 2 on your own. Sorry. It will always be smaller for sine and cos, but not necessarily for tan. And the reason why it'll always be smaller on the top for sine and cos is because your hypotenuse is on the bottom. Your hypotenuse is always your biggest side. Right? Because sine is opposite divided by hypotenuse. And hypotenuse always is going to be the biggest side. So cos is adjacent, 4, divided by hypotenuse, 5. And tan is opposite over adjacent, 3 over 4. Now, right now, this doesn't make much sense. When you say this, so when you say sine equals this, that doesn't mean much because you haven't said what angle you're working with. So the proper way to write this is to write sine and then bracket and then the angle that you're working. Okay? It's okay if you don't have that in right now. See which angle you're actually working with to get these results. So each one of these should have that in there. So it should be bracket A for all of those. You don't have to have it in now, but you do need to have it in the future. So you need to know that it should be cos, and then you have to say what angle you're actually working with. And then tan, say the angle you're actually working with. Okay, we're almost just actually solving some things here. We're almost there. This thing is a beautiful notes page, which will show you exactly how to solve all of these triangles. So if you're ever lost, this is your reference guide. Come back to this page, it'll show you exactly what you need to do. The first step is label your triangle. The second step is circle the side lengths you're given, which doesn't make much sense right now. The third step is pick a trigonomic ratio. Doesn't make much sense to you right now. And fourth step is solve it. These are your steps that we're going to follow, but you actually have to do it to be able to understand what's going on. So we're going to do the first one together. The next two are going to be on you. Before I get started, what I do is I write out SOH CAH TOA to remind myself what all those things mean. So I always write out SOH CAH TOA. You'll remember it because we're going to say it 1,000 times. We're going to SOH CAH TOA. Yeah, you're going to say it so many times you'll remember it, trust me. Alright, step one. The question is, find this side length. We can't use Pythagorean theorem because we don't have two side lengths. So we have to use SOH CAH TOA. We have to use that method. The first step to using that method is label your triangle properly. You label it based on the angle you're looking for. So this is going to be my opposite. This is my hypotenuse. This is my adjacent. Oh, my adjacent. No, it's always, so you pick an angle that they've given you. They gave me 45. I draw a line coming out of 45. Whatever I hit, that's my opposite. Think of it as it's the opposite to the angle, right? It's on the opposite side of it. All right. I've labeled my triangle. I've labeled it properly. Now I circle the side length that I'm given. So which side length do we know already? The adjacent. So I circle it just to remind myself that, hey, I have that one. And then I circle the side length I want to find. Which one do I want to find? I want to find my opposite because they've labeled it x. They're saying find x. So step one, labeled my triangle. Step two, I circled my sides that I have and my sides that I want. Step three is use SOH CAH TOA to figure out which one of these you want to use. I use SOH CAH TOA as a checklist. So this is how it goes. I always check the first letter in each. It's like that free space in bingo. You're always going to have those three checked off no matter what. I then check off all the letters that would correspond with what I want. So, I want my opposite, correct? I check off anywhere that I see an O. I have my adjacent. So I check off anywhere I see an A. You use the one that has three check marks. So which one has three check marks? TOA. TOA. That's the one you use. So, reviewing this. Step one, label our triangle. Step two, we circle the side that we have, and we circle the side that we want. Because it says it right there, it says X. Step three, we then check off in SOH CAH TOA to figure out which one of these ratios we need to use. The one that has three checks, that's the one we use. We check off the side lengths that we've circled. Now it's easy. So let's set it up. We know we have to use tangent. So we say tan, and then you put a bracket. And what's the angle we're working with? Here, 45. So tan, bracket, 45. Bracket. That means tan of 45. It doesn't mean tan times 45. It means tan of 45. Equals. TOA means opposite divided by adjacent. So what was our opposite side in this question? X. Divided by our adjacent side in this, 12. So we've set up our ratio. Now we need to solve it. We need to get x all by itself, which means we need to somehow move this 12. So what we do is we have to do the opposite of divide. So we need to multiply both sides by 12. And I always multiply it to the front. 12 times. Just keep waiting. It'll click. So now I have 12 times tangent of 45 equals x. That can go in your calculator. And it'll tell you what that side length is. So in your calculator, you're going to turn it on. You're going to go 12, then you go times, then you're going to click the tan button, and then you're going to go, it should automatically bring up one bracket, right? Yeah. Then you put in 45 and you close that bracket. And then hit enter. And it'll tell you what that missing side length is. And in our case, it's 19.4.
How many decimals do you want us to use?
1. If it doesn't say, use 1. So, it should be 12. No, you're right. It is 12. And here's why. So, just wait. How many people got 19.4? Okay. Your calculators are programmed 2 different ways. So, there's something called radian mode, and there's something called degree mode. In this course, we always want to be in degree mode. Everyone who just had their hand up, your calculator's in the wrong mode, so we're going to fix it. So put your hand up if you were in radian mode. All right. In your calculator, click mode. It should bring up a whole list of things, right? The third option down, mode is right on the top, right here. Pointing at it on mine. You want to go down and click on degree and hit enter so that degree is highlighted. You don't want it highlighted in radian. You want it highlighted in degree. So you move down, down, over to the right, enter on degree. And now your calculator should be good. So 12 is the right answer. 19.4 is not correct because that was the radian answer. We wanted the degree answer. So 12 is correct. Did everybody manage to change their calculator? If you didn't, I can change it quickly. You changed it? Does anybody need it changed? I can do it in 2 seconds. You good? You do?
Is it?
Yeah, that's good. That's where you want to put it. Okay. Do you want to try the next 2 on your own, or do you want to see one more? Hand up if you want one more. Okay, we'll do one more. If you want to try the next 2 on your own, feel free. So, very first step, I have to label my triangles. I label it based on the angle I'm given. So I'm given this 70, so that means this guy is going to be my opposite. This guy is going to be my hypotenuse. This guy is going to be my adjacent. That's always your first step. Label the triangle. The second step is you're going to circle which one of those things you know. So I know my hypotenuse. And I'm going to circle the one I want. I want my adjacent, because that's the one that they labeled x, and they said find x. I then have to use SOH CAH TOA to figure out which thing I'm going to use. So I'm going to write out SOH CAH TOA. SOH CAH TOA is a way of using it as a checklist. The first letter in all three of them is free. So I'm going to check off my S, my C, and my T. Those are your free spaces. I then am going to check off the things that I circled in step 2. So I'm going to check off all my H's, and I'm going to check off all my A's. One of those should have 3 check marks. In this case, it's so cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. That's what we have to use for this question. So let's use it. We write it out. We're going to do it in cos. But it doesn't make sense to just say cos. You have to say what angle you're using. So cos bracket 70. You have to say, oh yeah, I'm using that angle. Cos of 70 equals adjacent. What's my adjacent side? X divided by hypotenuse. 8.2. How can I get x all by itself? Multiply the 8.2 to the other side. So we're going to multiply both sides by 8.2. In our calculator, we're actually going to make that calculation. So 8.2 times cos of 70 equals x. When I punch that on my calculator, what do I get? Q. What do you get? 2.8. 2.8 is that? Yeah. So 2.8 equals x. That's your missing side right there. All right, try the third one on your own. See if you can do those steps. Because things change a little bit here. So, I set up my triangle. I labeled it properly. I did my checklist. I realized I need to use sine. So I set up my sine. I said sine of 27 equals 7 divided by x. But the problem here is we can't multiply 7 to get rid of it. Our problem is x is on the bottom. When x is on the bottom of the fraction, it needs to switch spots with the sign. So this entire sine of 27 and that x, they're going to trade spots. And it's going to become x equals...
Just a few announcements before the lunch bell rings.
7 divided by...
First of all, today is taco in a bag.
Okay. So we switch spots if x is on the bottom. Then you put that thing in your calculator. So 7 divided by sine of 27. Has anybody done that? What did you get? Okay, when x is on the bottom, that's a different scenario, and that's to swap spots. Tomorrow we're going to finish this, and then you're going to do a bunch of practice.